Lumacorp's control of the American military is another impressive tool in our possession. We have nurtured these institutions lavishly to serve as the prototype for our global police force. When ready, our technology and manpower will dominate those who oppose the coming new world order. By utilizing American patriotism, we have fostered in the American soldier the philosophy of peace through superior force. When the time is right, we will migrate that mentality towards the belief in a global government who must protect all people through superior force. We have used the American military-industrial complex to build the arsenal necessary to instigate the final cleansing outlined in Lumacorp's great plan. Our primary target will be Islamic nations who will never submit to our Western-centric domination. They also hold much of the remaining oil reserve of the planet. Lumacorp must own that precious resource, as it is crucial in maintaining our domination over the countries of the world.
Today, we've developed sensors that can watch with an all-seeing eye and see an area about the size of a small city, all at one time.
This is the next generation of surveillance. For the first time, we actually have permission from the government to show the basic capabilities. It is important for the public to know that some of these capabilities exist.
Engineer Yanis Antoniadis designed the new sensor, known as Argus. With 1.8 billion pixels, it's the world's highest resolution camera. Argus fits inside this pod that attaches to the belly of a UAV. But because much of the work is classified, we can't see the sensor itself.
Because we are not allowed to expose some of the pieces that make up the sensors, so you get to look at pretty plastic curtains.
Also known as Wide Area Persistent Stare, Argus is the equivalent of having up to 100 predators look at an area the size of a medium-sized city at once. This image was taken 17,500 feet above Quantico, Virginia, and covers 15 square miles.
This whole image is at a very, very fine resolution. So if we wanted to know what is going on in any spot along this image, say near this building at this intersection, we can generate a moving image that shows what's going on in the area.
Simply by touching the screen, Antoniadis has opened up a window showing a detailed area, while still maintaining the broader context.
And everything that is a moving object is being automatically tracked. The color boxes represent that the computer has recognized the moving objects. You can see individuals crossing the street. You can see individuals walking in parking lots. There's actually enough resolution to be able to see the people waving their arms or walking around, what kind of clothes they wear. And you could pick the location of where you produce these images anywhere in the entire field of view.
Antoniadis can open up to 65 windows at once and can see objects as small as 6 inches on the ground.
From even 17,500 feet, the white thing that you see flying around is a bird.
Argus streams live to the ground and also stores everything, 1 million terabytes of video a day, which is the equivalent of 5,000 hours of high-definition footage.
So you can go back and say, I would like to see what happened at this particular location 3 days, 2 hours, 4 minutes ago, and it would actually show you exactly what happened as if you were watching it live.
To create the world's highest definition camera, Antoniadis needed to design a new imaging chip. But DARPA, the project's funder, wanted to move fast and keep costs down. So he borrowed technology that most people have in their pockets.
Inside this cell phone, we find a tiny little camera. So if you were to take off the majority of it, you'd be left with an imaging chip. If you were to take 368 of these and make a big mosaic out of them and start shooting images, now you have Argus.
Unlike the Predator camera that limits field of view, Argus melds together video from each of its 368 chips to create a 1.8 billion pixel video stream. This makes it possible to zoom in and still see tremendous detail. Whether Argus has been deployed in the field is classified.
I'm not at liberty to discuss plans with the government, but if we had our choice, we would like Argus to be over the same area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's not very easily achievable with manned platforms. This is where UAVs come in, and they're absolutely the perfect platform.
Argus may be mounted on an armed UAV like the Predator, a long-range platform like the giant Global Hawk, or a development craft called the Solar Eagle that may someday stay aloft for years at a time.
The U.S. Air Force right now has the ability to archive every single video that comes off of every single UAV. We're moving to an increasingly electronic society where our movements are going to be tracked.
In a lab at the University of Pennsylvania, Vijay Kumar is funded in part by the military to create autonomous drones that don't need external links and, like us, can sense their environment.
What you see on this robot are these two chips here, which are essentially rate gyroscopes. These play the same role as the semicircular canals in the human body located near the ears, which essentially tell us orientation. So the rate gyroscopes that are on board can actually measure these angular velocities at thousands of times a second. This chip here is the accelerometer, and this allows the robot to sense accelerations in the lateral direction. So these are analogs to the otolith organs that measure acceleration in the human head.
When a human pilot feels an unexpected change in acceleration, he knows to adjust the aircraft.
And the robots do exactly the same thing.
The sensors adjust the craft by changing the relative velocities of the rotors and allow the drones to follow a leader with precision.
A fundamental problem in coordinating multiple robots is the ability to maintain formations. What a robot has to do is determine where its neighbors are and figure out what the relative position is, and then monitor that relative separation very carefully. You only need to tell one robot how to move, and the other robots essentially maintain formation by just keeping a specified relative distance. In the figure eight, they come within inches of each other, so they have to combat aerodynamic effects from their neighbors, and they have to have very, very precise control. And all that is done autonomously.
The precision of the robots allows them to do some things more quickly and accurately than human pilots can, like predict the movement and the shape of an object and adjust accordingly.
In terms of acrobatics, I think it'll be hard to beat what a robot can do. The neuromuscular system in the human body, there may be delays of the order of 80 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds before you actually take an action in response to what you see. Well, robots have this unfair advantage. They can do these computations hundreds of times a second. So your delays are of the order of a millisecond and perhaps even less.
In the lab, the drones communicate with a central computer that uses motion capture, an optical system that tracks silver reflective markers on the robots and tells them where they are at all times. But soon it may be possible to cut the cord. And they've already developed another autonomous drone that can go anywhere on its own.
The holy grail is to do all of this without any kind of external sensing, without GPS. And in principle, we can do it. These bigger robots actually rely on observations of external features to tell them where they are in the environment.
This drone carries a laser rangefinder that determines distance to obstacles and a depth camera that reveals 3D information about the surroundings.
They carry on board the processing power, the sensors that are necessary to look at the environment, to reason about the environment. So they can take their relative location and the location of the features to build a three-dimensional map. Well, I'd like to see this technology being used for humanitarian purposes. Imagine there's a 911 call from the building. I think we'll soon have the technology that enables, let's say, 20 UAVs to just swoop through the building and within a minute find out who's in each room and then communicate that to firefighters who are waiting outside. But any technology that you develop there are always people who are going to use it in ways that the designer never intended them to be used.
And the key components of drone technology are already available to virtually anyone.
Over there. I got into the hobby about 4 years ago. It started out as a toy for my dogs to chase. I'm pretty obsessed with the hobby. I'm currently single, have been for 30 years. No kids. I just live here with my 3 dogs, and I get to spend nearly every night and every weekend working on these things.
Corey Brixon of Orange County, California, is one of tens of thousands of drone hobbyists across the country.
The basic quadcopter is about $500, which is the frame, the motors, the speed controllers, the electronics that you need. This is actually the GPS sensor, and that's sending the signals out to the satellites. The cameras, as small as they are, they're high-definition footage.
Like the Predator, Corey's quadrotor has a programmable autopilot that uses GPS to navigate. He can set locations, altitude, and speed so the craft can fly autonomously. Corey flies for fun, but drones, small and large, are increasingly used domestically for more serious purposes. The Border Patrol searches for illegal migrants with Predators. Police departments are turning to smaller drones for reconnaissance. And thousands of individuals use them for their own, sometimes political, ends. The spread of drones has raised concerns about privacy and even led one senator to propose legislation limiting domestic use.
I think anybody that can use a device to peer into your activities, even if it's from the air outside your window or the air above your property, I think there's a right to privacy, and I'm all for making sure that all these drones don't come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and get put to purpose here that isn't consistent with our constitutional bearings. The worry is that in 2 or 3 years we'll have 30,000 drones crisscrossing the sky, accumulating all this information.
It's a game changer, but it's not just an American revolution. There are more than 55 other countries right now that are building, buying, or using military robotics, particularly in the air.
Iran recently announced it has its own armed drone with a range of over 1,000 miles.
And tonight, the vetting of the president continues as we bring you another edition of The Real Obama. Now, in this installment, we shine the spotlight on an executive order that the White House was hoping that you would never learn about. Now, the president signed the National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order late Friday afternoon. And since that time, now the measure has been virtually ignored by the mainstream media. Now, the order essentially gives the president of the United States absolute power over any and all American resources during both times of peace and national crisis. Now, this includes, but is not limited to, food and livestock, water, plants, energy, health resources, transportation, and construction materials, and gives the government the ability to, quote, control the general distribution of any material, including applicable services, in the civilian market. Now, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney laughed off a question about the document at today's briefing. Let's take a look.
There's been some online commentary suggesting this gives the executive branch power to allocate energy, food, water in either peacetime or wartime. And there are some conservative blogs that are pushing the notion that this suggests the White House is preparing for a war with Iran. Can you explain what this executive order was?
Well, I cannot explain that reaction to it. I think it was a fairly standard and routine piece of business.
Now, not everybody's laughing about this executive order. In fact, some have suggested this would give the president of the United States the authority to declare basically martial law during times of peace. And to be sure, this is simply the latest string of actions taken by the administration that ignore the basic principles of our Constitution. Joining me now in tonight's edition of The Real Obama, Jay Sekulow from the American Center for Law and Justice, and Fox News contributor Lanny Davis. Guys, welcome back. Lanny, this very specific section, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, is 801J, if I recall.
J, right. That's correct.
Why would the president change that definition? And, Lanny, you're an expert in media. Nobody is as good as you. If you want to release something that you don't want people to find and you're in the White House, when do you release it? Late on a Friday afternoon, hoping nobody pays attention to it. Why would they release it?
I used to release things at 10 o'clock on July 3rd. That was a really good...
Yeah, that's a good time. I got it.
Is that this is really not a significant risk to America. I don't know why he made those changes, to answer your question, but there's no risk here because every president needs authority in times of emergency, such as a nuclear attack or something that is another 9/11, and this authority has been on the books, and President Obama won't misuse it. The real question is, why are the extremes on the left and the right so quick to jump beyond the facts and look at the worst possible interpretation? And it's almost
I can give you the answer. I think what this is, Woodrow Wilson progressives like yourself, Lanny, one of the things we conservatives have a problem is you guys believe in this concept that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, and so you can ignore issues like checks and balances and separation of powers, like in the case of recess appointments. So I think we're looking at this differently, and that is that in this particular case, does it give a president pretty much impunity to do whatever they want? And why change the definition, considering the president has thumbed his nose at the Constitution in the past?
First of all, my point of view is he hasn't thumbed his nose, and if the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional, let the Supreme Court decide that, not Jay and Mr. Justice Hannity. But most importantly, this is more reflective of the paranoia on the left and the right that's going on in America and polarizing this country so badly. Jay and I, as Jay is a conservative and myself as a liberal, are able to exchange views in a civil way with Sean Hannity as a civil moderator. What's going on the Twitter and the internet is lunacy. If you read some of these comments, it's not Jay analyzing this calmly. It's complete
why are we
lunacy.
Attacking people that have
and
a different
nobody
view?
is mentioning Ronald Reagan, and I'm only saying that it's the extreme interpretation that causes the polarization in this country, Sean.
And the president has never contributed to this by saying Republicans want dirty air and water and want kids with autism, Down syndrome fending for themselves. He's never contributed to this at all.
I don't like rhetoric. I don't like the extreme rhetoric. Sometimes I think the president has gone too far, and so has the Republican Congress. And when there was a Republican president, there were recess appointments, guys. So let's be even.
Not recess appointments while they were in session. That never happened until Obama.
This session was one senator holding the floor. This session was one senator holding the floor, and that was an abuse of the Constitution.